Hello and welcome to the Player to Coach Pod. I'm your host, Josh Hill, and alongside me, my co host and former teammate, Jordan Alexander. We made it to episode 8. We beat the national average of 7 episodes per podcast.
Let's
So
go.
I'm proud of us. I'm proud of us.
Yeah, super excited about that. It's been a good day. It's been a good weekend, so I'm excited about today's episode. I think we have a an interesting topic that correlates with basketball. We're talking about the weight room today. So I feel like Josh, you can probably allude to this too. I think there's a lot of different opinions on the weight room when it comes to basketball players and how they should use it and what's important in the weight room. So, um, I guess generally speaking, in your opinion, um, is there a certain way that basketball players should approach the weight room, or things that you grew up doing, or I don't know, what are your ideas? What are some opinions you've heard?
Yeah, like you said, the weight room's an interesting topic. I think either way, you can't be too hot or too cold on the idea of being in the weight room. I think there should be a good balance. First of all, I think every basketball player should be in the weight room no matter what.
Hmm.
Um, Really, at like the later ages of middle school into your high school years, you should start making a little bit of a regiment for yourself. Um, for me, I was in the weight room pretty early. I played football growing up, and I got into lifting. I really enjoyed it.
What's pretty early for you?
Like you have like those PE like lifting things like when you're in school and like middle school, and I would like go into school early and like do those like by myself. So like middle
Yeah, yeah,
school, I started doing some stuff. Obviously, wasn't anything incredibly regimented or crazy, but I just enjoyed it. I like the idea of getting bigger and stronger. So I got in pretty early. Um, I think overarching, I think there should be a general ratio of like you should at the very minimum be on the court doing basketball workouts at least twice as much as you are in the weight room.
mm-hmm.
I think for every for every hour that you're in the weight room, I think you should be putting twice as much work in on the court. On the court work is far more beneficial to you as a basketball player than being in the weight room. Like it's just how it is. Um, yeah, I think there's a fine balance. I think um, obviously most importantly, you need to know what you're doing in there. So if you don't have any experience, you should go to somebody to learn, whether that be a coach or personal trainer. You need to know how to do it safely, number one, and then need to know what you're doing. You shouldn't just be in there dinkering around. But yeah, I think it's really important. It's proved beneficial to me. I grew up a post. I grew up to like 6'2" pretty quickly, so I was like 6'2" going into my freshman year of high school, so not incredibly huge, but I played a big man, and so I needed to have a little bit of physicality to me, and so if I didn't have any experience in the weight room or didn't do anything in there, I would have struggled.
Yeah,
But so it proved to be really important for me. In hindsight, I wish I had a little bit more balance. I think I got I have kind of a bigger frame, so I put on weight pretty easy, and so I enjoyed looking big. So there was times where that 2-to-1 ratio for me of being on the court was more of a 1-to-1 ratio. For every hour I was on the court, I was equally an hour in the weight room, and so obviously I still worked on my game, but I also enjoyed looking big. So which is still helpful, but I think I could have definitely used some more time and more energy used on the court. But yeah, what about you?
yeah. I definitely think there has to be a balance. You kind of touched on that. I've never really thought of it as like being on the court twice as much sort of thing. Um, I'm sure you've probably heard this before, but one thing that I was always encouraged to do, or have encouraged players to do, is after you get a lift in or a workout in the weight room, make sure you go get shots up.
That's a
You know,
must.
I think that's like super important actually for players. Otherwise, you could just like completely, you could ruin a shot. You could change your shot if you're not staying consistent with your reps, because all of a sudden you can become like super strong and you don't even know what your range is or how it has changed your shot. Um, that is a transition that I felt very dramatically throughout high school. So I was like I don't know, I was pretty small, I guess, like going into high school. Trying to think of how tall I was. I don't know, maybe like 5'6", something like that. I'm 5'11" now on a good day. So I hit a growth spurt in high school, really like kind of between my freshman and sophomore year. And then I put on a lot of weight, good weight, between my sophomore and junior year. Um, I started varsity my sophomore year in high school, and honestly, like the biggest difference was between like me and other players was the physicality. And obviously, that's where you kind of first start to see the speed of the game changing. And so I put on like 15 pounds of muscle the summer between my sophomore and junior year, hit a growth spurt. So I played, my junior year at high school at about like 5'10", 5'11", and weighed about 165-ish, 170, um, and which was a good weight for me at that point. I've mentioned this, I think, on other episodes prior, but I was super into CrossFit. I was kind of doing that like basically the whole off season, like 4 to 5 days a week. And with that, there's a lot of like different. That's not just your traditional weight room setting, right? So a lot of body weight movement, running, all that kind of stuff, power lifts. So complementing that with like skill work and actual basketball workouts, I think was super beneficial for someone like me. Um, and so that was really good. Um, you mentioned something in your answer that was kind of interesting to me. You said, like it's really important. It's more important for a basketball player to be getting reps on the court than in the weight room, which I agree with. But I think it made me think of this. You talk about like longevity. Let's talk about like NBA players for a second. Like you always hear it's so important for them to take care of their body.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, they're talking about nutrition, talking about weight room, but those guys are seriously taking care of their body off of the court too. So, like, what are your ideas on that? I guess as far as if a player, we're not experts, right? So
Mm-hmm.
we haven't been necessarily in that setting. But like, what are your opinions and thoughts on something like that? Like, if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think there's a direct correlation between, obviously everyone like rolls their ankle, like everybody has like injuries like that, but I think there's a pretty direct correlation between being durable and people who are in the weight room
Yeah.
and working out safely.
Yeah.
Something that I was introduced to probably my freshman or sophomore year at NCU. I can't remember. So it was like lifting. Then like after like you get injured, there's rehab. But there was this idea of this way to train. It's called prehab. So just
Mm.
doing lots of exercises that help prevent injuries. Not necessarily something that'll like take your athleticism to the next level, but a lot of balance stuff. A lot of like isolation stuff where like pausing at the bottom of your squat. So not just kind of powering through that, getting done with it as quickly as you can, but taking a moment and pausing, or like on the downward motion of a squat, the eccentric motion, like going really slow during that. So like really building up kind of those micro muscles that you have. Um, I think that's really important. And like I think all encompassing being in the weight room doesn't just like amount to like throwing a bunch of weight on a bench and like going
No,
for it.
definitely not. Definitely not.
It's it's like taking care of your body as a whole. So like rolling out your body before you do it, making sure like properly warming up, and then after you do it, like stretching out a lot. So like I think there's a lot that goes into it, obviously, but yeah, I definitely think there's a direct correlation between durability and also just um, being able just to take your game to the next level. I mean,
Yeah.
similar to when you're on the court, like if you can only do like a few things on the court, then you're really limited. So like there's that idea of like having more tools in your toolbox type of a thing on the court. It's the same thing. Like if your shot's just not feeling, not feeling good that day, like if you're not strong enough to like create space for yourself in it, like in the confines of like a legal contact move, then like you're limiting yourself.
Yeah.
And it's, I mean, you can kind of see it more now when like, I'm past my playing career, but like when I play against younger kids that, obviously there's like a age difference and like strength in that sense, but like I do like still work out, and I have for a long time. And so there could just be those days where it's like, hey, this kid that I'm playing against, this high school or whatever, might be more skilled than I am right now, more in shape, but I know how to use my body better and I'm stronger than him. So it's like, I'm going to have a
Right.
really basic game, but I'm still going to beat you because I'm just stronger. So
Right.
it's just like, why not have all the advantages that you can?
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's probably one of the biggest changes, like I kind of talked about, to the high school level. I think it's extremely heightened when you get to the college level. Not only just like the speed of the game, and like the physicality of it, but like there's dudes that are huge,
Yeah.
and and it's one of those things where it's like you have to take advantage of every different part of the game as you can. And if you're better than somebody in every way, but they're just stronger than you, they have specific advantages that you can't just muster up in one day. So I think it's really important.
Yeah. Definitely. I agree. I have like my opinions on what I think is most important for a basketball player in the weight room. But do you have, before I list mine, do you have like, you know, muscle groups that are most important to you or what you think basketball players should be working on?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it comes down to like three different areas. Like if you're really not about being in the weight room and like you're just trying to do whatever's completely necessary and that's it, you should be doing a lot of legs, a lot of core, and get some shoulders in there. And like really, you can call it a day after that.
Hmm.
Um, Truthfully, because I mean, like your legs is very obvious. Like that's where you get your stamina from, your power from. It's how you stay in front of people. It's where you get most of your strength from whenever you're playing. Core is obvious as well. Like just about every move that you make involves your core. And then anything involving your arms, you're using your shoulders. So it's it's pretty simple. I think more times than not, you should stay away from mass gaining.
Yeah.
If you're doing weight where you can only get up 6 reps of something, I think you need to lower the weight. That type of thing. You should stay in the 10 to 15 rep range probably, which is a little bit more muscle conditioning. Because it's not necessarily one specific move that you need to make. You need to make it over and over and over again over the course of a game. So conditioning your muscles. But yeah, I think if you're really just trying to get in and get out and only do the essentials, legs, core, and shoulders, and then fairly low weight, but just explosive.
Hmm. Well, that's super simple because those are the exact same three that I have,
There you go.
which I guess is a good thing, right?
Right.
Consistency and ideas. But no, I think those are super important. Um, I think there is, to kind of touch on what you just mentioned, I do think that there is a time and place, maybe in the off season, to try to put on some mass for certain types of players, right?
Right.
Because if I'm being honest, like if we're talking about, or let's talk about like recruiting, okay? Um, it's easy to tell who has and who hasn't been in the weight room. Okay, there's only so many Kevin Durant's out there, so um, like it's important, if you're comparing guys, maybe, yes and no out of high school, but if you're like recruiting from a junior college or something, like their clock is a little bit shorter. So if they haven't been in the weight room at that point, that's kind of maybe a red flag a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think that it's important for some guys because some players just have a build, right? That's like a super skinny, slight build. And so they might need to put on some mass in their shoulders and maybe in their legs.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I agree with you. I think that like muscle conditioning is super important. Higher rep counts with a lower weight. I think that's pretty common for basketball players, and so I think it's also just like you're less likely maybe to get injured in the weight room.
Yeah.
I have been injured in the weight room, so that's like speaking from experience. Um, and so yeah, I think you're spot on with all that. Um, yeah.
Yeah. Um, Kind of going off of that, I think there are like some pros and cons that come with being in the weight room, and most of the cons just come from like lack of knowledge or like um a lack of understanding of like what's
Hmm.
beneficial to you. So I think the obvious pros of being in there is durability, strength, explosiveness, stuff like that. Really, the only cons that I can think of are like if that's taking away from your time on the court, like we kind of hit on that earlier, just that time in between. That was something that I struggled with a little bit. My freshman year at NCU, I was redshirted for most of the year, and I figured, hey, why not just get freaking ripped over here, you know?
Hmm.
And it was like there was probably like a 2 or 3 month span where it was like go to practice and then immediately after the only work that I did off the court was just go lift afterwards. And I mean, a lot of that came from, um, me knowing that I wasn't going to be on the court anytime soon in a game. And so it wasn't, top of my list of priorities to have, every single nook and cranny of my game, fixed up. But I think had I been in the rotation at all, that would have been an alarming way to be training my body to only be in the weight room off the practice court and not doing anything on the court. So if it's taking away from what you're doing on the court, then I think it's a little bit of a problem.
Hmm.
Um, I think there's the balance like you had kind of talked about, like as far as building mass. I think, um, especially for someone like a body type like mine who can put on weight pretty quickly, I think there becomes a moment where you start to realize, hey, I'm working out because I like the way that my body looks when I put on more and more weight, versus you know being a little bit more in basketball shape rather than just
Right.
super strong.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. You
and
got to have a
then
purpose, right?
right, and then just like you could say that you're going to the weight room to really work on your stuff, but if you're only hitting upper body, skipping leg day,
Yeah.
you're putting
Don't skip leg day.
right. That's
Basketball players, don't skip leg day.
if anything, you should really only have leg days. You should just add a little bit of upper body on top of that. Like, should be the opposite of what some lift culture is right now. But yeah, I mean, really, those are the only cons that I can think of. Is if like you're doing it unsafe or if you're doing it for the wrong reasons. I don't really
Yeah.
think there's anything bad with being in the gym, even at a really early age. Um,
Yeah.
like you said earlier, we're not experts in this, but I started in the exercise science field in college, and then I even it wasn't officially a minor of mine, but I took all of my extra classes that I could get in different like strength and conditioning, whatever. It's even from like a really early age, it's not a bad thing to be lifting. Like it's stunting your growth and
Right.
those are all lies. Everything about
Right.
it. Like
As long as you're
it's
doing it the right way, right? Not
right.
hurting
As long as you're
yourself.
doing it the right way, and even like do body weight workouts. Like those
Yep.
are great for everybody. So
Yeah.
I think working out there's really only positives that come from it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the cons, like you kind of touched on this, is um, you do have to have a purpose. It's the same exact thing as like, if you're going to lift, you got to go get shots up afterward, that type of idea. You still like if you're a basketball player, you want to be a skilled basketball player, right? We don't want like you know guys like football players. Okay, like football players playing basketball have this like reputation, right? In general, not everybody, but like just like running through like screens or like crashing the rebounds like really hard and just fouling everybody, right? It's like your stereotype for a football player that plays basketball. Like, okay, we're
You
not
run like a
saying like,
box.
right, right. So if you're gonna like gain mass or become really strong because of the weight room, you gotta do twice as much work on the court, right? To um, you know improve your skill. So I think that's super important. There are pros. There's a ton of pros, and it's super important to be in the weight room. You want to be stronger than your opponents. Um, I think that I started to recognize this maybe in high school, like okay, because now I could shoot the ball, so okay, now I can shoot it from here off the catch. I can shoot it from here off the dribble, which was further than maybe what I was used to. Which that expands your game and it improves your game, and it can take you to the next level.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think it's funny to see. I kind of mentioned Kevin Durant earlier. It's like he didn't do one rep of the bench press at the NBA Combine, which it's like
Mm-hmm.
185, I think, is what they're trying to do. And then you have guys that are like, just throwing up tons of reps of that. But, so maybe it's not as important for like a 6'11" point guard, basically, right?
Right.
But it could be a huge difference maker for, your typical like 6'3" guard um, in the NBA, and you're trying to separate yourself from people, that are the same size as you because there's a lot of guards that are 6 foot or whatever. So, yeah, I don't know. It's really interesting. I think it's something that um, there is a population of basketball players that probably shy away from the weight room because they don't want to ruin their game or they just haven't been taught what to do. And so
Mm-hmm.
they don't fall in love with the weight room. Maybe like a football player might fall in love with the weight room. It's completely different, right?
Right.
But yeah, I don't know. It's interesting to talk about for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And I think especially um, like shorter guys who are particularly quick, I think um, there's an obvious like advantage to being tall in basketball. Like the
For
hoops
sure.
not changing in size, like whatever. Like if you're taller, you're naturally more you have more of a chance of being a better player. It's just like it is what it is. So I think even more so as a shorter player or someone who's like incredibly quick, making sure that like your body's in tip top shape is like incredibly important. Um, and if there's any like nagging injuries or like you're injury prone, that's really tough to continue to play somebody who has a height disadvantage and then also is slowed down by something else. So I think even for shorter players, it's like even more important that they're in the weight room, not only just for strength, but just for durability wise. Because like we all know that there's, that big man on everyone's team that could just be a little bit slower than usual, but he's used to being slow, and then he's still big enough that he can bruise other people and make it happen. He doesn't need to be face guarding full court or whatever. But if you got a bum wheel and you're the guy who puts pressure on the other point guard full court, like it's really tough to play you
Right.
if you really thrive on quickness. So just even the idea of like if a huge strength or like a need of yours to be on the court is your athleticism and your ability to stay in front of people, you need to be in the weight room because it's going to lead to being keeping you on the floor.
Well, and it's gonna like, let's say you have a player, right, that's really good at one thing, and then the next year you're playing in college or high school or the pros or whatever, and you're playing the same exact team because it's the same exact player that you played against, but that guy's gotten stronger and you haven't. Now
Mm-hmm.
he's pushing you off your spots. you know he's improved defensively because he's not letting you get those same shots off. So yeah, it's definitely important, I think, for you to be in the weight room and be progressing, and taking care of your body, and being proactive, like you mentioned at the beginning. I think it's important to be proactive rather than reactive, especially in the weight room. Injury prevention is huge. So yeah, I don't know. That kind of alludes to our last thing that we wanted to talk about, which is conditioning. We talk about muscle conditioning, but conditioning is a big part of basketball. You got to be able to get up and down the court at the speed that you need to be successful. I think there's a lot of different ways to, get your body in shape conditioning wise. But what are some things that you think are important for players or teams to be doing conditioning wise to, be in shape and ready to go for the season?
Yeah, I think just making sure that like you're aware of um, the type of conditioning that you need to be doing.
Mm.
Like there's like conditioning's a pretty wide range of things. I think the I don't know, just understanding that like on a basketball court, you're not going to be running straight in one direction for a very long time at the same speed. Like that almost is never going to happen. And so making sure that if it is something on a track that it's you're really not going around too many times and that it's way more high intensity, high speed conditioning rather than I'm going to see how many laps I can get today and you're going at a slow jog. Like that doesn't really help you in any way. Um, I think I think like playing, but like playing with a purpose is important because like I can make it through a whole game right now, but I would be standing in the corner and like spot up shooting as much as I can and like helping, not really
Yeah.
guarding.
Yeah.
the so like maybe just being really intentional about the way that you play in your off season, like make it a point of contention to really like press up on the ball handler every single time and like stay in front and then like run harder than everybody in fast breaks and like never stop moving, stuff like that. But something that we did at NCU is we ran hills quite a bit. I think that was good. I think um, that's really challenging and is on the spectrum of like intensity. It's pretty high up there.
Hmm.
To be running up a hill is really intense. Obviously, we didn't go very far, and honestly, we were probably out there for 30, 40 minutes max, and that's with rests in between. But yeah, I think just making sure that you know that you're running and conditioning the right way. Same thing with the weight room, like we just got done talking about. Like it's really important and it's really helpful if you're doing it the right way. And so
Yeah.
if you find yourself on a treadmill for hours and hours, it's not really helpful. And if you find yourself just kind of playing pickup a few times before the season, then it's not adequate enough.
Yeah. I think a big part of conditioning, a couple things. One, I think when I like was conditioning for a season, I tried to do a multitude of things, whether that's like, short sprints. I would go on, a couple mile runs though. And I think for me, I viewed it as like this was my mindset when I did something like that. It was okay, if I'm gonna go on, 2, 3 mile run or whatever, those last 5, 6 minutes of the run, can I push through that and maintain my pace?
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of had the mindset of like, okay, does that mean that I'm going to be able to play in minutes, 30 through 40 of a 40-minute game? Um, that was kind of like my mindset when doing things like that. But at the same time, basketball players aren't distance runners.
Mm-hmm.
And so you definitely have to have a balance of the types of conditioning. I would agree. I think hills are beneficial. I think if you have access to sand, I think sand workouts are
Oh
beneficial.
yeah.
That just makes your legs feel heavy. So then everything else after that feels light.
You feel so
Um,
bouncy after you're on the sand. Oh my
yeah, I
gosh.
mean, honestly, like, it just feels easier. Even if maybe you're not running faster or moving as fast, it's
Mm-hmm.
easier on your body. So maybe you can do the same things for longer minutes throughout a game. So I think that's important. I think tying it back into the weight room, like conditioning your muscles by, pushing yourself and not like when we talk about light weights, we're not talking about like, 5 pound weights or something like that. Like you still
Mm-hmm.
got to be able to push yourself for those last few reps of like 12 to 15 reps or something.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so hitting those breaking points, I think, is important. Whether you're conditioning or in the weight room, just because that correlates directly with the end of a basketball game. Are you going to be able to get that extra stop at the end of the game because your body can, take that much more energy to use? So, yeah, I think that's super important. Um, do you have anything else to add about the weight room conditioning at all?
I want to read a few different So I've been a part of as a player and as a coach a lot of different teams, and I just want to read off a few of the like preseason conditioning requirements of a few different places. So this one's at Anderson University. It's a D3. It's where I finished, or it's where I got my degree from, and I was a student assistant coach there while I was finishing my undergrad. And they had a choice of running a 12-minute 2 mile run, six 400s on the track, in under a minute 15. Not consecutively, they would get a break in between. Or there was run five 16s on the basketball court with like back to back with a minute rest in between, which like isn't the most like, you have to be the most fit person in the universe to do, but it's still pretty intense. Like you
Right.
need to be really locked in, physically and mentally to do that. And um, from my understanding is that if you couldn't complete that when they asked you to, like by the date that they had everybody do it, then you weren't on the team.
Hmm.
Like you you weren't allowed to show up not in shape. It shows a level of disrespect to your team, your teammates, your coaches, your program, your school, that you weren't taking it seriously. And obviously there's other conditions where if you had an injury or whatever like that, it
Right.
makes sense. But for the most part, it was, you better make sure you can complete this task, or else you're clearly not taking this seriously enough. Um, so there's some there.
Hmm.
Find the other one. Uh, one of the podcasts I listen to a lot is the Old Man of the Three with JJ Redick, and he talked about the 3 minute runs. You'd basically just run baseline to baseline for 3 minutes, and based on position, based on player, you had a certain number that you had to
Hmm.
get. And he talked about how his minimum number was 27 touches in 3 minutes, which
So
knowing
basically
JJ,
like
and
13 and a half down and backs.
yeah, which knowing if you watch JJ, knowing how fast he is and how much he runs on the court, for that to be his minimum, and he talked about how tough that was. Like that's pretty difficult. So
Yeah.
I think even just taking a few of these, and like if you're a player currently, like I'd try to do a few of these and just kind of see how it feels, especially if you're not at the college level yet, and see kind of what, you know, dedication and what kind of effort it takes to just physically prepare yourself for the season, not even on the basketball court.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, there's a lot that goes into it. There's one other thing I'm trying to remember about conditioning. Um, oh, one thing that I'm not like a conditioning like as far as my body type goes. I don't do well with conditioning. Kind of a heavier set, bigger dude. Just like naturally, so like running in and of itself, I really hate. But I think one thing that I could always find like the mental capacity to do is like to push myself conditioning wise if I was on the basketball court. So even just like having a certain number of like, I have to go as hard as I can and get, whatever numbers of fast break layups in. And so you're just doing fast break layups, full sprint, all full length of the court. Like that's basically just running up downs, but like the fact that I had a ball in my hands and I was going hard, and you're still focusing on
Right.
finishing, work on different moves, finishing. There's different ways to go about it if like you really hate just being on the track, which like I did, even though I did do stuff like that. But even just stuff like that, just being intentional with how you work out. Like you can be on the court and really just be like, I'm trying to, I'm really just trying to burn myself out today, and go ahead and work on your game while you do it.
Yeah. I would agree. I think you always have to have a purpose, whether that's an actual basketball workout, being in the weight room, or conditioning. Um, it's good to be in the habit of having a purpose or having a goal, so you can push yourself. That's really the only way you're going to be able to keep yourself accountable in those situations. Um, but yeah, I agree with you. Don't show up to your season out of shape, and not ready to go. Obviously, like maybe you're not going to be in the best shape that you're going to be in, when games start, because maybe you're going to do stuff as a team throughout the preseason, but don't show up super far behind. That's a great way to create a bad reputation for yourself as a player. Yeah, that's a pet peeve for coaches and teammates alike. You don't want to, like you said, disrespect your teammates, let anyone down. The off season's super important, and you got to take advantage of it. So
For
yeah,
sure.
that's all I got today. Do you have anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, there's one more thing I just remembered.
Okay.
So right now I'm doing a lot of like group training, and there's a group of high schoolers I was working with, and I like to have conversation with them about stuff that they really want to work on, and a lot of them talked about just like improving their jumper and like getting up numbers of shots this off season because I don't have access to a gun.
Right.
And so it's like, hey, we got a group of people, let's work together and let's get you guys some reps up or whatever. And we were like really only like 20-25 minutes in when like most of them were too tired to keep going. And so it was kind of a different view from what we've been talking about. We've been talking a lot about team stuff, but like if you're paying someone to train you and you're too tired to do anything, then like you're just kind of wasting everyone's time. And
Right.
so my biggest advice to him was just like, just please run like these next few weeks before you see me again, because I'm really limited in what I'm able to teach you as far as like we can go over everything, but you really never learn until I get to see you doing it and I get to critique it and show you how to do things. And so if you're not able to perform that for even 20 minutes and we have multiple different things to go through, then you're kind of just limiting yourself to what we
Yeah,
can work on. So it's like, dude, just get in shape first of all, and then I can actually teach you. I can't really teach you anything if you're gassed the whole time.
it's
But
true. You're limiting your potential with that and growth in other areas. Yeah, I
for
agree with
sure,
that.
for sure. But cool. Yeah, I feel like we covered quite a bit on that.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
I'm sure there's some wild stories out there of preseason conditioning. I remember in high school I showed up and it was my senior year and there was just trash cans out and it was just don't puke on our floor. All right, it's like all right, here we go.
I've been around a gym like that too. Yeah, that's funny.
It's those are pretty pretty intense days where they just you get an email before just bring your running shoes. All right, it's like ah, crap, it sucks.
Yeah.
So yeah, you don't want to be the guy at the back of the line those days.